So, welcome again to the audience out in the air. So, please leave just a message, hello, hi, or whatever, that we see how many people are out there. We have a small group here in the room. We are interested so that we could really involve you and engage with you, that you just give a short message in the chat that we see you there. And hello to the people here in Montreal. So that's great that you are here and that you took the way. Some of you for a very long trip to come here to Montreal. For this workshop, like it's in the name, you will have to work. So now you still have the opportunity to leave the room and not come to work. But the door is closed. What is important, it's a series of sessions and also workshops. So we already had one workshop before, and we'll use the results of this workshop to go further on in this one. But we take you with us, so we don't leave you alone. But it's already also earlier in this year and earlier also in this summit that we started to gather information from different sides. So therefore, I would make a short introduction. So it's this product room session 8 of this workshop, and then we can now go further on with the slide, please. So we have Radboud Baayen here in the room from Kettenstandard in Netherlands, who is Director of Standards at Kettenstandard and is member of the Product Room Steering Committee. And then we have myself. We can go one slide further on. So I'm the CEO of the Swiss Research Center of Rationalization in Building and Civil Engineering. So that's my day-to-day work, and I'm holding the chair of the Program Steering Committee. So we are processing this workshop today and going through all the work together with you. So you will do the work and we just monitor. And please one further on. So in workshop 1, we made an introduction, a summary of the product room sessions we already have, and especially yesterday morning when we got some industry input. So that I will repeat also in workshop 2, that you get a little bit the history, what we are thinking about. Then we made this groundboxing session in the first workshop, where we gathered really ideas and information. So what are the requirements, the ideas, the dreams, the wishes of the community to the product room? So what should we deliver, what should we do, where should we engage? And we started then really with this dream of the product room. Workshop 2, after this wrap-up of workshop 1, we want to go then more into a thinking on a timeline, roadmap. So by when should we deliver what, and what should be the deliverables at the end of the day. So it's not that we expect final results out of the workshop, we expect kind of a guidance, a kind of direction of the community, where we go then back to the steering committee, work on it, and make an also proposal to buildingSMART executive team. So what the roadmap and the position of the product room should be in the future. So then I would like to step in these sessions we had concerning the industry input. We had one session, unfortunately not here live in Montreal, but we had a session with Stora Enso in September in the steering committee, where they told to us what their requirements are. So we had 3 industry inputs in September steering committee. 2 of them we had also here yesterday morning. And it was the idea to get input from some kind of special industry representatives. So Stora Enso is a company in really industrial manufacturing, it's wood production. So what they are thinking about products and what a product room should deliver. We had then Schindler. Schindler, that is the company that produces elevators, you probably know. So there was more the aspect, well, we have a plant in a building, and our plant is probably almost as complex as the building itself. and they gave us also their input. And then we had with Cycloc, a logistics company, that talked to us then about, well, what is it about logistics? It's not building, it's not construction, it's not planning, it's not facility management, but it's a lot around building and construction, and what we could provide together with them in more efficiency and productivity if we provide the data. So starting with Stora Enso, so one very important, interesting input was, well, OpenBIM, yes, they are talking more about Open API. So OpenBIM is Open API. Why? Data export and import is probably not the last technology. It's not state of the art, and it's probably also not what they need, what they request, because they talk about real-time and bidirectional data provisioning. One aspect of the Stora Enso was, so if we do an IFC export for somebody, the data is away. It's gone. It's like if you make a present to your wife, flowers, you give flowers, flowers away, and a few days later on, the flowers are probably dead, so you lose it. Stora Enso says in industrial manufacturing, around about the construction side, that's not good enough. We need to have this bidirectional and real-time data provisioning on both sides. So that's the reason I talk about Open API. Then another very interesting aspect was, especially for industrial manufacturing, data is a source for calculation. It's not just an information. It's not just that it's good to have some data, to have some information. They need it, they use it for calculation, and produce some following data that they could write again for other processes and other courses. Then they talk about a system approach. So it's not only about products and material. So products and material and work and in a system, in a composite, or however you call it, but at least you have to manage both. You know it also in planning and construction. So at the beginning of the project, you're talking about a wall, but later on you talk about bricks and plasterboards. So that's what they also have in industrial manufacturing, that the system is very important, and the system itself has information and data. Then they talk a lot about use cases that are important for them. We picked out two of them. So one is that how we could transfer sustainability specifications to the manufacturer. And that's an also question, like, what is sustainability? Sustainability is not black and white. It's even controversial. So that one aspect of sustainability does not really support the other one. So a CO2 balance does not fit 100% to a circular thinking. So if you take, for example, only the CO2 balance, then this building with wood is good, and we have very good CO2 balance. And if you want to increase your CO2 balance, then you build with a lot of wood. If you think circular, you should build with as less wood as ever possible. So how could we specify this, and how could we provide this kind of information to the manufacturer? Then we have another use case for them. It's also an interesting one. I was not aware of it. So how to transfer manufacturer relevant specifications, and they talked as an example from a grind direction. Said, well, that is something that is important in the planning. It's important for an architect. So what the grind direction is for example, a vertical in a door or a wall, and they have to know it in manufacturing because that is crucial for correct manufacturing. They talked also about third-party data sources that we say, well, it's nice, accessible, and it's provisioning, it's not file exchange. So it's really that a built environment needs to be an information system where you can access data, you can get data, and perhaps you even can provide data back. So also bidirectional. So the next one was logistics Cycloc. Interesting here, because it fits together with the industrial manufacturing. OpenBIM is Open API, once again. Real-time bidirectional data provisioning they're asking for. Very important for them because these are real-time processes they are running. in logistics. They also talk about information about building in progress to validate logistics requirements. That is very important, for example, that they have the situation that there comes a truck with material, with products, they load it off, they have no idea if it's for this construction site. They have no idea if it's the right time for this material and these products. So eventually it would be better to send it back. What happens then quite often is that it's really for the wrong construction site that they load it off. They don't know it. They don't have then somebody on this construction site that uses it, and a few weeks later on it's waste. Because the construction site where the material was thought for, and they didn't get it, they already knew. So that is something that also we need this building in progress information that we can validate what kind of material and products are really brought to the construction site. Then they need also better information about material and products to validate their logistics process. So what is it that is here? Because quite often they do not know. They get pallets of material, they load it off, but they have no idea what it is. And that leads them also to mistakes, to waste, and to a lot of workarounds that cost money and time. Also, they talk about a system approach, and there it's in a way quite easy to understand. They say, wait, a logistics company handles with bricks and plastic walls, not with walls, usually. Eventually also with walls if it's prefabricated. But they have to know. Then they are asking for geo-referencing. So they like to know where the material is needed. Is it the right construction site? We already covered that. Also, what floor, what area in the building or the construction site, so that we really can provide the material and products at the right location. And they also should know where it is. So they had the case where they talked about that, for example, we get pallets of let's say, ceramic on a construction site. Then they put all these pallets, let's say, on the second floor, but the ceramic is for the whole building. But at latest in the fourth floor, nobody knows anymore that on the second floor it's ceramics for the whole building. And then in the fourth floor, they say, well, we are missing ceramics, and they're already again. And that was stored in the second floor is waste again. So that is something they are requesting. And then also the use case here, also how to translate. I made a mistake also in the first presentation. There was a copy and paste there. That's still from the first answer. But what is also interesting, also important here for logistics, they're also dealing with third-party data. So they're also using various other databases to run their business. So it's not only about, I think that is very important, what we learned, it's not only about planning, construction site, and so on and so forth, it's much more. Then you could go one further on, thank you. So that is the Schindler plans, so a plant in a building. Also Schindler talks about OpenBIM is open API, it's about open API. They have even, they go even one step further on, because they are talking about a framework they're asking for real-time operational data, because their plant produces data, and they're interested in this data. And eventually, especially if you do maintenance for another manufacturer, or if you have to provide your plant or your elevator, but another one will do the maintenance, then you need also this operational data then from one vendor to the other. So that also for standards and open API to provide this kind of data. Then they're also talking about the system approach, a little bit a different view on it. Because they say, well, we have a closed system with a known life cycle and a known asset management within the building. So it's a plant in a building, and we have to be able to manage this. So also interesting here, so that in a life cycle of a building, you'll probably get 2 or 3 times a new elevator. and these elevators will be maintained, renewed, and so on within the life cycle of the building. And they have to manage it. So that's their system approach. Then they have also this process approach, so that they say, well, this building and plant life cycle and value chain, so that you have different life cycles and different value chains for the plant and the building. And that should be considering all surrounding stakeholders. So also here again, it's larger than building and construction. That is the important part here. They say that it's interesting from a large and probably also dominant manufacturer. They say, well, we need a global and neutral, a generic approach. So because they know they are never alone. And that is good to know that also manufacturers are aware we are not alone. Of course they do lobbying, of course they try to get a competitive advantage and so on and so on. But at the end of the day, they know they will never have a monopoly on the data. And also Schindler talks about third-party data sources, so they use various content databases to provide and process their business. So that was what we got from the industry inputs. That was where we then also stepped into workshop 1, and now we're starting workshop 2, where we will make short summary after it, and I'm sure Radboud can support me. What we worked on in the last session, and then we would like to go in a timeline so that you help us out of this outcome of the last workshop, that we get the wrap up from our side. What could be the steps on a timeline, and at the end of the day, we talk about concrete deliverables. So what could be the outcome of the specific process and topics we covered in the presentation?
Yeah, so what we did in the first workshop was start with a blank sheet. Nothing here. And we took about an hour to put on some post-its and determine a couple of main themes. The main themes we determined from the first workshop was definitions or explanations. One of the topics was question, what is a product? The second one is referencing data. There's you cannot put everything in the model, so sometimes it's logical to get data from elsewhere. Well, Michel knows about that. Referencing big data, for instance, is so. What would be the role that for the product room is get clarity on that. As a third one, the topic of governance. How is the governance of product room in relation to the other rooms in buildingSMART, and on what kind of topics should we talk about? One of the items that was named was BSDD, but it also can be about buildingSMART services as a whole, and also what topics and what kind of mandate would we have. And that's not something we can decide as a product room, but it's an input to us to say something about. Fourth one is data exchange. Well, talking about IDS, coordination with other rooms. So there's something to say about that. And as a last one, but not least, maybe the order is not correct, is the process map. So we were thinking about having a process map on how data flows through the process, and who is then the stakeholder at what moment in time, and what kind of use cases come out of that could be interesting for the product. So we got these 5 up. My question to you is there an item which you say should be on there for the product room as a focus point?
When you look at supply chains, the approval points for the product may not be just when it comes on site. It may be during the manufacturing process. So, for example, if you're doing precast wall panels, there may need to be a certification of an inspection of the reinforcing steel that goes in the panel before it's actually fabricated. So you would also need to be able to track the validation approvals process for the products through the supply chain.
it's one of the items that came. I think I can match that with compliance, and there was another card there. Just let me see if I can find that. I think that was with stakeholders quality management systems, combination with energy management, and what was it here? Adoption and global governance. Those were on
Quality management.
Yeah. Quality. Okay. So good point. We got it.
Certainly, your first point was aligned very much as the definitional side of things. Always confusion about an asset and a product.
Yep.
Is it just an asset you buy, or is it more complex than that? To have the right setting for to differentiate between our asset modeling on one side and the product modeling on the other side. As a startup, that we have a common view there. We have so many views there.
Well, and we combine the definition question to the process map, because a product during the process map can be different things. I mean, a product can be the bottle, but it can also be the end result of bringing a product, a building product, into the building creates a different product. So a wall panel will create a wall, will be part of a division between rooms. The whole building is a product. There's no clarity on that, so
It's a relative notion, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that was the idea on getting a bit more clarity, because the name product room, you might soon go to a manufacturer room instead of having data flowing throughout the whole process and saying, okay, this holistic view of what a product is, that we can define that. So that was the outcome. Okay.
Maybe something with sustainability. It relates maybe to other rooms, but
Yeah.
Could be part of.
It's on there.
Okay.
It was mentioned by Trinidad to put that in, because there's a new energy sustainability room being set up.
Yeah.
So there would be a logical relationship with that room. So it's it was mentioned. Yes. Put it on what we call advice for stakeholders on what those issues are.
You also have it a little bit new definitions, explanations of what is a product. If you go to construction product regulation, then today you are very fast, very deep in sustainability topics.
Yeah, no one, Michel?
I'm not sure whether the topic is in the right scope, so I have to check, but the relationship between the BSD, as you already mentioned, I've seen with many sessions now on BSD, and I see the JSON schema approach now, and I'm wondering all the time, how does it exactly relate to the 86 standard, the attributes for properties, how does it exactly relate to the 12063?
Yeah.
When I talk to Leon, he says, yeah, it's all connected by the IDs, but I want to know how it is really.
Yeah.
But maybe it's too technical for this context, I'm not sure.
Well, we try to put all the post-its on a piece of paper with a square around it and say, okay, are there things in or outside the square? But this is a topic that should be combined with the governance and who says what about what. Because we can touch the topic, but the technical room will have something to say about the technical layer. And the domain rooms will have a requirement on what it actually does. So this is something that we can put up requirements from our point of view, but not maybe for the rest of the community. So there's a collaboration needed.
One aspect is also, as you say, so BSDD is discussed everywhere. But first, I have to understand the processes, the use cases, and so on and so forth, and then I have to take a decision on the product. But is BSDD a tool that solves the problem for us, or eventually not? And we shouldn't prioritize BSDD just because BSDD is a technology provided by buildingSMART. Eventually, and most probably, it will be a tool that will solve some problems, but we do not yet know which problems. And as soon as we know this, then we also can do the last workshop, Then it's probably about the product room to define, for example, a functional requirements with BSDD. We say, well, to solve this issue, we think BSDD is the right tool, but we are missing one of the other functionality.
So it's from a specific scope getting requests for changes, development items, etc. And that's also a governance issue, of course, that who is allowed to say, has mandate to, etc. That will develop.
Where are you considering the different views or data requirements of the stakeholders? So if I'm delivering some windows on site, all I want to know is how much it weighs and what the size is, because then it depends on how many people I need at the end to unload it safely. And if on the same window, if I'm doing an environmental impact analysis, I need to know how much aluminium, how much glass, how much. So we've got the same product, but we've got the different views of that.
Different set of
and we don't want
characteristics.
that all just as one massive list of properties. We need to be able to divide the information about that product up into different stakeholder views.
Yeah, and there's a strong relationship with IDS, you might say, in that sense. So
And the BSDD.
and BSDD as having the data templates
Yes.
and divide them up and make sure that everybody has the right information, right time,
Yes.
right place.
But the important part is also the process map. So to understand the processes, the stakeholders in the processes, and then the specific use cases. Because then you see that, for example, the information request for a window can be in different processes, different use cases, different. And that's, again, is all the discussion. Before I have this idea, this understanding, it's difficult to talk about tools, about interfaces, about structures, properties, entities, whatever, because we should focus then on these parts in the ecosystem where we also think, well, there we really have the potential for efficiency, productivity gain. And we don't have to focus somewhere else where say, oh, it's nice and interesting to exchange some information, but it will not make the process better at the end. And perhaps we also will think about then changes in process. Say, well, is it the right way we do it today? But that's probably only something we could mention. We are not the ones that will define the process.
But there could be deliverables in between coming from the product room to help solve them. Radboud, you had a burning question.
Yeah, that was more a comment about what Michel said. I'm not sure that was so a technical comment. I think we have two parts there. The first question is BSD compliant with the standards? And then you have the technical part where you tick the boxes and you know what's corresponding to what. But the main answer from the product should be yes, it's compliant, no, it's not, or at which level it is. So that's not a technical thing at the end, even if you use. And I think that was a bit what you were asking for. So not so technical, and maybe we can have a look at it.
And that has to do with communication too, because the rest of the world has to know that this is what it is and this is what works.
But again, is it right now that we should do that? That's a main topic.
That's the only question happening.
And so we get to these topics with the first question we asked you the last workshop is what is your vision? Imagine you're at the buildingSMART Summit in 2026 and we stand together, we can shake our hands, yes, we get this done. This is what we aimed for in the coming 5 years. This is where we want to be. And the question we now have for you is, if these are the items that we should focus on as a product room, what are the steps in between to get there? Maybe we cannot solve everything. We know that the wheels of international developments, they turn slowly. But still, if we have deliverables in between every year, 1, 2 things, we can take steps. So what I would like to do is take from top to bottom the 5 themes and put some items on the board, what we should do next year. What should be our deliverable for next year? What would give you the best value for the building smart community from the product. Oh,
So I hear a lot about governance. So I would try to understand exactly what that means. What's a good governance, what's a bad governance, what do they need the governance for? So that's very clear, and then there is a basis for possibly implementing such a governance scheme. But understanding exactly why is governance important, what are you afraid of is going to happen if you don't have the governance, what's the governance going to be for? All those ones I think would be something that's achievable in the next year or half a year or something like that.
I will second what Noah is saying, because virtually we are all talking about sustainability. So this
no, the question for us is what is within the total governance of what's already there, because there's a lot already there. Should our role be, and what kind of mandate does this group have, or what kind of advisory powers does this group have? And maybe it's a good thing that it's not only a deliverable for us, but a deliverable, I guess, for buildingSMART as a whole to have more clarity on that.
We can deliver, this is what's needed,
Yeah.
and you get it done or not. Can we get it
And
done?
have a discussion with buildingSMART board. That's the way to go. Probably we'll have to wait for the new CEO. But I'll put it up here as a first item. So that is clarity on governance. Let's put it like that.
Just a small question, but we've got a lot of governance here. Is it related to the idea that who is going to say what are the right properties and stuff, expert people deciding that? Is it related to that? I remember your story on that.
or is it related to governance of PhD, or is it related to the governance of?
That's a question. Yeah, let's be honest, for both or templates only or etc.
That's
Yeah.
exactly
So
the question.
that's the idea. Yeah.
All talk about governance, but virtual, we know what we're talking about.
And the thing is that we're now trying to create a roadmap, which also, if you have a roadmap, you know what you want to do, and then you set in there who is also needed and what the relationship between those entities is going to be. But it's the organizational thing.
I think the process map should be the first thing because everything what follows can be traced back to the process map. Because we were talking about governance. Yeah, but what governance? What parts do we have? What stakeholders? We need to have that information first to be able to do this clarity.
What is in the process, man? Process? Which process? What kind of processes?
Yeah, well, that's probably the first question we have to ask. So the first idea we already discussed at a very, very high level is really that you have the knowledge construction process. So from a pre-project, you have planning, you have implementing, you have running, you have deconstruction. And then you have all different stakeholders. That's engineering, that's manufacturing, that's home sale, then planners, contractors, and so on. And then really talk about so what processes are in there, so who is interacting with whom in what process, and then focus in the second step on use cases. That is a first
So
draw.
we want an as is and a to be process map of construction, design and everything.
Yeah,
And then,
also-
or does that already exist? Do we use something that's already there?
That we do not have yet investigated. So I expect there will be sources. So we are not the first to think about it. Perhaps it's not in the way we would like to use in the product room. Perhaps it's not final or not complete or whatever. But at least whatever is there, you should use.
I probably, yeah. And that- For me, I'm trying to get my head around the whole thing. So I think some use cases, at least just scratched out, 4 different use cases or something like that would be a good place to start, just so that you can start thinking, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that you've got this stuff there. I'm not sure. I'm pretty certain they're not linear. In that you have your process map. You have your process map, which maps out the dependencies between the different stakeholders and their actions. in order to, and then the process map that helps you to find the data that's needed for every interaction within that. That also picks up on the referencing of data and the governance of that process. So a way to proceed it would be to have an iterative cycle where you either went down, say the time, so shows a different specific discipline or component, followed it all the way down through time, or you could start looking at the whole of the project at the conceptual level first and build deeper down as for the entire project.
I'm not 100% sure if I really got the point.
Okay, so if we come up with the process map and then we start mapping all the data and so on, then we'll need to revise the process map because we'll find out that the data requirements, for example, don't quite match what we were talking about.
Yep.
So we would need to go through a number of cycles.
Yep.
So if we chose, say, environmental analysis as a starting point, and then map that all the way down through time and level of detail, then that would cover off those factors for that particular area of interest. There would be cycles as you drill down. You wouldn't just be doing the process map first and that's fixed, and then you do the other stuff.
Yep.
Use use cases to test.
Yes,
if
and
that
use
cycle
cases
is
that,
correct.
use cases of the drivers.
So should then the process map, the concept process map should be here, and then use cases as a result of that in the next year.
Won't your process map come out of the use case? I would have thought the use case was the starting
Chicken
point.
egg.
Yeah.
Shall we have a look at what infra room and railway room did with their user stories? They've been working a lot around user story. Can it be an entry point or just to check what they've done?
Yeah, sure.
I'm a little bit defensive because what I've seen concerning use cases also in other rooms, they are all focused very heavily really on this planning construction area. But we are focused on product information, product data, and that is not planning and construction.
I was not talking about addressing the same, but having a look at how they did this.
Yeah.
But to do something really different.
That is the, you are now from the asset life cycle, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it more here, just to suggest that it's more on the information on this? Is it not the information life cycle? How do you get to the right properties? So, I remember a story from you taking kind of life cycle approach, thinking about the expert teams and coming to the properties, having to consolidate them in a VTD, whatever. It's the information life cycle, not really the railway life cycle or the. It's not correct.
Yeah,
It feels a bit like another life cycle.
When I was talking about having a look, that was more the way they addressed it.
Yeah.
But not the story.
Yeah, okay, but the way they do it, but then applying the information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that the same story we had. So if anything is available and that helps, we shouldn't reinvent it. So if this helps and that's an approach we think that works also for what we try to achieve, then of course we should adapt. Yeah.
So again, that's only about the approach, not about what I did with the stories, because
That makes
I
sense.
think there is nothing comparable.
By the way, I'm not an expert in building a process map, so that would be then also probably first step is if we think that would help to have this process map, and it's really and thank you, Michel, for this input. It's about the life cycle of information, of data, of products, material, and whatever. It's more about this and not the asset itself. And that's perhaps a difference to other rooms, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't hook in and say, well, it's a good way they did it. That's good.
And it would be, the result would be a view on how the other rooms, the domain rooms, can use information, what they would need during the process, independent of the subject domain.
Would an appropriate starting point to leverage this be to pick up on the existing IDMs and MVDs, because they already have process map stored in them?
Sure, whatever is there and fits, we shouldn't reinvent.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the current IDM development, MVD development can be an input to our processes.
Probably have to then translate the MEDs to IDS. But it could be also a task, yeah.
Well, I think there's a little bit of a misconception about MVDs and IDS being a competition.
No, not competition, but an evolution perhaps more.
Well, maybe MVD XML, but the way I picture an MVD is it's a description of the objects and attributes that are appropriate in a certain domain.
Yep.
And we have to do that anyway. IDS is about the information delivery specification is about mapping the information and values that flow across a single transaction within the processes within the MVD. So you still need your MVDs.
Okay.
Or you need the knowledge that's embedded in the MVDs. That's a better way of putting
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's pretty steep. Deliverable for 1 year, but we can do it in parts. It's a modular thing.
Sure, it's a modular. So for me, it's a question. For me, it makes sense that we should get clarity of governance, then process map. But on the other hand, my questions are also, if we talk about the timeline, if these definitions, explanations of what is a product shouldn't be something that we have to do quite early, even earlier than the other parts. Well, okay, could be part of governance, of course.
Okay, well, I'll put it on the, so we can switch.
Yeah.
If needed.
Yeah, that's what we propose it.
Considering the development of products down the supply chain.
Yeah.
Just picking on your water bottle, for example, the plastic that comes into the factory as an input to the manufacturer. You get two different types of plastic, and that one factory would produce the bottles, possibly another factory would produce the caps. Then that would go, so that's an assembly process there. Then the caps and the bottle would come into another factory, which would then, as individual products, then that's put together in that factory. They add some water, and then they put the screw cap on. So they come in as components and then become an assembly within that factory.
Yep.
When they send it to the shop, then that's a product for the shop. So you've got the individual components coming in and being made into assembly with a stage in the supply chain. But once then that leaves as a product for the next group on the supply chain, the next stakeholder.
Yep. And I think what we can learn from them is because they have this data life cycle management already.
Yeah.
There it works. And as soon as the bottle comes to the construction site, we lose it.
Well, or
We
it's
don't have
also
to.
No, we don't have to. But today, that's reality.
Yeah.
So, if we look at the definition of a product and the result of the work, it's probably the white paper document that is being set up. I put version 1 on it because I expect that this will run through the whole years. Because the definition of product, you can list it out, but it has to be in depth, and it's not going to happen in 2023 all of it. Same goes for governance. We have this clarity on governance, but then the next step would be implementation of governance. or discussion over governance with buildingSMART International. So discussing if you're okay with that. That's number 3.
Are there more definitions than only product?
What's that?
Are there more definitions than only product?
Well, this was about what is a product,
Oh.
and that's a whole wide range. Was a discussion about ETIM. That you have EC classes, you have modeling classes, but we're missing something, so we're going for combined classes. And that whole discussion of what is a product, is it a single object, a combination of objects, etc. So there's a whole wide range there, which I think should be
Define the buckets first.
Yeah.
What type?
don't boil the ocean, that type of thing. I just learned that term yesterday. I keep using it.
Yeah.
For a more pragmatic approach for the rest of this year and into 23, should we be identifying what IDMs, MVDs exist, and then also what the gaps are, what would be necessary. And then we could be saying to the other rooms, okay, here are the IDMs, MVDs that aren't available. That's your responsibility to create.
Is there an overview of what the, because I don't have an accurate, what kind of entities and stuff there is out there.
We can ask Leon.
So yeah, it's
What's the latest there? There's only 3 or 4 of them now. They're fixed. Is that the final thing now?
I'm not sure, I don't know.
Does anybody know the latest status of the discussion?
Yeah, but you don't have to wait for an MVD to be fixed and set up before we could actually use it as an input to what we're doing.
Yeah, but I mean the whole idea of these flexible MVDs, well, as I understood, was now fixed into just a few MVDs.
Yeah,
Or is that not yet a general rule?
Apparently there's a memo flying around by people who work on MVDs who do not want to be
So that's
constrained.
not yet decided in that sense.
Yeah, there's been a suggestion, but it's not set in concrete yet.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of pushback.
Okay.
When we go to the topic of referencing product data, this is coming from the idea that you don't put everything in the model or the graphical model or whatever, but you have a reference library next to it or reference data next to it. Instead of transporting everything, you relate to it. But all, let's see what Björn said about that. We have properties of classifications linked, rules of connection and integration, and external open bin product information. So that's a bit of the boundaries that we were discussing. Question is, what if we want this clear in 2026? What do we have to do in between? Is that a document? Is that should we provide a document on how this should work? Is that a job for the product group? Should we help the rest on how this process should work for the domain content?
Should it be rather a guideline than a white paper?
Guideline, yeah.
Then I think it's also a little bit combination of what we have here in combination with process maps. My question mark is it's more for data exchange. So it's a kind of clarification. MED, IDS, link data, referencing data. So a kind of a concept. So what we think would be the right way to deal with product data. So is it really an export-import thing so that it provides product data, or is it more a link data or referencing data. And I think what we could deliver is kind of a concept, a proposal, a guideline, but probably not more. And then start to discuss it, of course. And then hopefully there will be results out of it.
Well, if we had a use case or two, we could try out the template mechanism within the PSD to see how that works.
So kind of a prototype then, really try to show. So having the concept and then a prototype to show how it could work.
We've got some technology there. We need to find out whether Frederick did it right.
We're already doing it. So is product or asset/product identification also a special topic? Like object identifiers,
Yeah, that should be
for
part of it.
GS1, etc. Use for assets, depending on the definition, and maybe it's not the same. So.
Yeah, so there's some research to be done there, what's already out there and how it's being used. Of course, we have some experience at home. So that this one could be, let's put right here on the edge. Because it would be great if we can actually deliver something that is working.
Yeah.
Instead of only pushing paper and creating documents. This is great for knowledge sharing and putting it down. But
Having a concept and then at least some kind of prototype or whatever to show how the concept would work, and then perhaps you work again on the concept.
I think Michel would be happy to help when it comes to link data on that.
Yeah.
Well, I know. I'm just warming you up. So, I guess we addressed all of them somehow. And this, of
Perhaps
course,
we
is
still have the use case. Is that where I expect that's then an outcome of the process map? Eventually, what Fredrik mentioned could be also vice versa. Don't know yet. At least, and it should be a next step. So process is one, but then a specific use case, special use cases that have potential for increase of efficiency.
so when do you want to do that? 24 or 25?
Yeah, probably 25. So you have to stay realistic, I guess.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I think that should be a collaboration with other groups.
Yeah.
That would be best.
Yeah.
Of course, this is not fixed in concrete. As soon as you've done a year, there's going to be a next year here and a year off there, so then everything changes again. But it will give guidance on where we put our efforts in. Because probably this we have to pitch in Rome what will be delivered in Singapore. That's I heard it was Singapore.
1 year's time or?
Yeah, next year this time. And, so because that's my idea on how this should work within the product room. If we can make it feasible, is we have a steering committee. We could push out some working groups to do the work, and then we'll have a year plan by the end of the year. Have a pitch on where we are and what the next steps are at the spring summit, and have deliverables at the fall summit.
Because you have to talk about what really a concrete delivery should be. So if you talk about definitions of what is a product, so version 1, what is it? Is it the paper? Is it don't know, something in the data dictionary or whatever? So what is it most probably that we deliver then? If you talk about what is a product, version 1. Give an idea.
One thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is the life cycle of the product description. So early on in the project, you have a very general description. So we're going to have a brick wall. And then as the design's refined, you decide whether it's going to be, say, a single skin wall, a double brick, or a cavity brick. So you've got the gradual increase in detail as the design process continues until you know that you've got this brand of brick here, another brand of brick here, and some brick ties in between them.
Yep.
So you've got the life cycle of the product, or the product description as well.
But it's not about the life cycle of the information or the data.
Originally, when an architect's doing the first BIM model, they just do a wall as a generic wall. They just, there's a wall there, we don't know what it's going to be.
So it's from specification then
yes.
to this to
Yes,
the
so
concrete product. Yeah.
Yes, so you gradually get more detail. And if you're doing, say, some energy analyses early on in the project while you're trying to decide what sort of external envelope to use, you'll be using some generic data for particular types of product. But it's only later on when you get into the detail that you say you're using product A rather than product B, you then need to check that the product that you're using later on actually still matches the requirements in the early stages.
The process of populating data.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that also brings up the issue of performance requirements, so that if I do a thermal analysis, I might say I want a R2.5 on this wall. So how do I search for the assemblies or products that are going to provide me with that level of thermal performance?
This is very close to specification on different levels.
Yes,
having your 100% data set where you have pieces that you need, and sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. But that could be something that's
our core business.
Yeah, it's our core business, and it's focused enough to say, okay, you write down in words what it means, but you can also create subsets to show what it does.
Yes.
So I summarize that in report and model / specification to be able to present that. So I will fix that to this one as a result. Right.
And then discussing governance. What could be a result out of discussing governance? Discussing alone is probably not good enough.
There are a couple of possibilities. One is they tell us, well, keep your mouth shut. That's a governance item. No, but seriously, I think that this is something that it's about the organization and the role of the product room, specifically with all the rooms or all the steering committees within buildingSMART, what they can do, how the relationship between board, community, and steering committees is.
But what do we expect as a result? A decision of buildingSMART international executives?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not. I was hesitating because decision or maybe creating an inventory of what the need is from the various rooms, and we can put down as a steering committee what we think our need is, and then of course it has to be mixed with all the other rooms before it can be a decision. But I think it's important that we use the bottom-up approach from our side to make sure that the top-down will meet up somewhere.
So that's our responsibility. It's just around the discussion we had in the first workshop. So where we also discussed that this governance topic is of course also a topic of an operation within buildingSMART. So if you want to provide governance in the sense of that you have quality assurance staff that is, for example, within BSDD, then you need an operation, you need people. So that's not the you can do with volunteers, and that is perhaps something. If we say that that's important, it was the input that if you want to go to a government or to a large manufacturer and you want to convince them that BSDD, for example, is the right tool or the right way to publish data or structures or whatever, then you have to give them some guarantee that there's quality in it. But if you want to guarantee this, then you need an operation that really does this, and you need processes and so on. And so there could be then something like that we have to force or to manage that there is some kind of decision of building smart executives.
And that's the second part.
So how will it look like? Because the PR8 is now something really out of my daily business. That's the reason that we, CRB, do not use the data dictionary, because there is no governance around it. So why should we put content, intellectual property, into a data dictionary if there is no governance around it? And they mentioned
So this is a very clear one. Discussion of governance is providing our input. We can do this.
Yeah.
And we can do this maybe with steering committees from other rooms.
Yeah.
And the clarity on the governance should lead to a decision.
Yeah.
Which is also a roadmap for BSI.
Yep.
Agree?
I would say discovery of governance instead of discussion of governance. Because discussion you can do forever, but discovery is.
My writing is so bad that you read Discovery. I like that.
Go ahead and take credit.
But it is a discovery path. I agree, because some people say there is a governance in place. I'm not clear on that. I have a slide on how I think buildingSMART is formed, but that's not completely aligned with what Richard Kelly says. So there's some communication needed around that to get clarification. And that's
And it's a large topic. So I remember a workshop I joined from buildingSMART concerning these kind of discussions. And it's of course, if you talk about governance and you say it needs an operation, it needs a team, it needs people, you have to pay them, then you need a business model. So you have to charge somebody something for a service, for a product, whatever. So it leads really to a lot of open questions. What I know that there is also something that troubles buildingSMART, and on the other hand, there also should be a solution at the end of the day. At least we have now somebody responsible for compliance, because governance is selling, so perhaps that is one step forward.
Yeah, you don't have to sit on the chair of buildingSMART management. But I think as every room has a right to have an opinion on how this would work for us. All right, so
Now that's version 2. It's perhaps again a report or a model. And then what could be the outcome of the process net information life cycle. So that's probably kind of documentation to know how you would document something like this.
yeah, and the use case definitions or descriptions should come out here.
Yeah.
Put it down like this: document and use case shortlist.
Yep.
Well, we got our next 2 years ahead.
Here, so all this discussion about use of data, reference data, exchange data, NVD, IMS, that's probably also kind of a very important in the first step. Or the concept, perhaps even more the concept. So how do we think, and that's probably important to have the stakeholders in.
Yeah, so maybe not completely in 2026, but this will lead to that.
Sure. That's a prototype. So we need some software that it shows that it works, how it works, or brings us back to the concept and we say, well, in the implementation, see that it's not what it's meant. It doesn't work.
So there's a two-way here. That's this one comes from there. So
Yeah.
It comes from the shortcuts.
Yeah.
So,
And that should then probably be something use case management. buildingSMART. The output. Use cases documented in the use case management tool. Considering the standards there. So if you disagree about what we agree, then shout.
yeah, and are we missing something that you guys say that has to be done? This has to be done by product group before 2025, or in 2023. It's not going to happen in 2022. Sure you.
I'm sure what is missing, but I'll trade up by the VCD scheme again, where it says special things about material. Things we classify as materials. How does materials fit in this product? Is it a special case or is it special attention? Or
So that's for me one aspect for definition of products. What is a product? Is material a product? Is it an assembly a product? How do you handle it? Very important. Yes, we talk a lot about products, but a big part of the construction side is material and a product. And also more difficult to handle quite a bit. Yep.
Just a general thought, I'm not sure if this is a request or anything, but I have a sense that product data throughout the whole life cycle is not easily available for any construction project. And it's a cumbersome process today. You usually end up with PDFs, not data. Is there something that this group should start looking at? How can we sort of untangle that, and how can we help and inform the industry of some ideas or thoughts or considerations around how to unleash all the product data that is out there, that has been put down in PDFs and not really made readable and stuff?
Isn't
I
this
think that would fit in number 2. Referencing data or collecting data wherever it is, and that there will, because you're missing content basically.
Yeah, and it's maybe not necessarily how technically do it, but how do you influence the industry to start to understand and think more in terms of sharing the data?
because one be openly now.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. I think
This is an interesting thought, if I may, because this has to do with marketing. This is a marketing issue. It's how to influence the industry to work towards what we do. So I think that yes, we can have a thought on that. And also coming from our companies that we actually do this day-to-day business. And feed that into buildingSMART organization. Luc and I are having a lot of discussions about where does management of standards stop, and marketing begins, or relation management, customer relation management, and how does it fit together? And I think that your question, your requirement is on that level. But who's going to do what and how does it work together? Because influencing the industry is not, well, I think not our job, but we do need it. We're dependent on it. Because otherwise, well, we've been working on BSD for 15 years, and finally, after 15 years, everybody's talking about BSD. It takes time, and it takes a message. So,
The impression that it could be a self-runner. So if we succeed in providing a concept, so how to provide product data in a sense, is it reference data, is it link data, is it MED IDS, is it IFC for products, whatever. If we agree as an industry that that's the way we should provide or get access to product data, and we even could make a proof of concept in a prototype, I have the impression that the industry is waiting for it. So if they get the concept, they will be very open to provide data in this way.
I'm not sure about that. Of course, technically it can be done.
Yeah.
But my experience is with a lot of vendors, they don't want to be comparable, for instance.
That's
If
true.
they're not the market leader, they don't want to be comparable because they are showing their weaknesses or they become too transparent in a sense. But how can we convince them that in long run maybe this openness is better for them than
The market will do so because once manufacturers want to provide the data and everyone else start working with available data, they just won't show
Just
up
have
with
to.
anything. It's the same about company having a website. 20 years ago, they were thinking, should we invest in a website or not? And today, if you don't have a website, you don't exist as a company. And from the experience and the talks I'm having with the manufacturers, they actually want to do it, but they are waiting because master data management is a lot of workload, and they don't want to do the workload without knowing what they should actually do, because I'm receiving a lot of access from manufacturers which you actually can abuse, and they ask me, how should I provide the data?
there's so many ways.
Yeah, I don't know, I cannot help yet. So most of the manufacturers I've talked to, they're just waiting for a guideline to be ready to do the workload as promised.
And I agree that it's a network effect, of course. That the start will be hard. So until you have the first, also let's say, important dominant manufacturer suppliers provide the data in this way, and as soon as it starts, so you have a kind of minimum of number of manufacturers provide data, then of course it's a competitive disadvantage if you don't provide your data, because the industry sees, well, we can get access to data. It's 2 or 3 manufacturers for one area, but it's perhaps good enough, and then the other ones have to follow. But start can be hard.
Also, there's a power imbalance of this in Norway and I think also in the US, where the owners who has the money in cash, they can sort of set the requirements. We want this data in my model or whatever. But they are hesitant because they want the right general contractor to do the job. And they don't want to push them too hard and have too hard requirements, because then the general contractor will go somewhere else and they will get stuck with some subpar general contract or something.
Yep.
And that's a big hindrance, I think, at least in Norway, and I suspect it's sort of similar in the US.
Yeah, well, it's what we also mentioned in the last workshop. It is also a lot of a power game.
Yes.
Yeah, it's about growing the advantage.
you see it even with the CPR.
Yeah.
CPR is mandatory in Europe for having a declaration of performance on a certain set of characteristics that are put into a harmonized European standard. And they're mandatory to have one value declared in their declaration of performance. That's what they will do, nothing else, because then they're comparable on, and they're only comparable on technical performance values. But still they don't. It's not about price, it's just technical requirements. But as soon as one of the competitors will fill in that second value, then you have to go with it. That's the point. But the CPR has been in effect since 2013. So that's 9 years ago. And it's still difficult to get a declaration of performance from a manufacturer, even though he is mandatory to be lifted. So I put it down as product data transition to open available structured data with their message underneath. Maybe that's the, you can put that somewhere here, I think.
You need to have the concept, you need to have the prototype, and then of course you can start to talk about it and to invite them.
Yeah.
It's the two and four. Huh?
So we're already running out of time. It's about 5
Almost,
minutes.
yes.
Yes, about 5 minutes left. Any final words? We're not starting new discussions.
Was it worthwhile to be here?
Yeah, well, I expected, to be honest, that we would actually discuss some of these instead of plan them out, but yeah, it will come.
That was the first
There was
one.
Yeah, so I was too late. I was just too late, sorry.
We're still the time for it.
Yes, maybe that was managing expectations, but all right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to take
Thank
this
you
input
much.
and get back to you in Rome on this.
Yes.
I guess.
Thank you.